The arrival of the aliens marked a day humanity would never forget. From the cold depths of space, a technologically advanced species, later nicknamed the Zenith, descended upon Earth, their ships dark and imposing against the sky. As soon as they touched down, their intentions became clear. They sought to assert dominance, establishing a reign of fear, assured that humanity would submit with little resistance. To the Zenith, Earth was merely another inferior world, ripe for conquest and control, its inhabitants too primitive to pose any real threat. They underestimated humanity's capacity for resilience and overlooked one significant detail of life on Earth: the animals that coexisted with their human counterparts. In their rigid, hierarchical worldview, the Zenith saw animals as irrelevant, mere distractions unworthy of concern. Their advanced sensory equipment and automated systems were designed to detect intelligent threats: humans, machines, and active weaponry, not the complexities of human life, culture, or relationships with other creatures. As they initiated their conquest, they disregarded the lives surrounding them, dismissing the planet's natural ecosystem as nothing more than background noise. This oversight would cost them. Early on, the Zenith deployed swarms of reconnaissance drones and automated sweep teams, meticulously scanning and neutralizing anything they perceived as aggressive. The goal was to establish an immediate aura of terror by eliminating all perceived threats and disrupting everyday life to erode human morale. These sweeps extended across cities and countrysides, erasing any sound or movement that might challenge their rule. They targeted anything that growled, barked, or otherwise appeared territorial. From their perspective, these creatures were nuisances or, worse, unpredictable threats. The noise of barking dogs, in particular, sparked a fierce response, drawing the attention of Zenith drones that viewed such sounds as indicators of resistance. Unaware of the role dogs held in human society, the Zenith enacted mass eliminations. They moved swiftly, systematically taking down family pets, police dogs, and military canine units without a second thought. In one stroke, they eliminated countless dogs, including those belonging to an elite U.S. Special Forces canine unit stationed at a critical military base. The loss was devastating, particularly for the soldiers who had forged deep bonds with their canine partners. For these special forces, their canine companions were not just animals. They were teammates, trained for years to operate alongside them in complex maneuvers and missions. Each dog was a trusted partner, a skilled ally, and, ultimately, a friend. As word spread through the canine unit of their partners' deaths, grief turned to a cold, determined fury. The soldiers were left reeling from the loss, not just of colleagues, but provided companionship. To these soldiers, the aliens had not merely eliminated animals. They had severed bonds of trust and loyalty, igniting a thirst for revenge. The mission was no longer just about Earth's defense. It had become intensely personal. These men and women swore to avenge their fallen partners, to make the Zenith pay for their cruel misjudgment. From the aliens' perspective, the silence that followed their sweeps felt like confirmation of their success. They interpreted the quiet as the first signs of Earth's submission, never considering the possibility that they had instead provoked something far more dangerous. In their arrogance, the Zenith believed they had achieved victory, oblivious to the profound emotional blow they had dealt to an elite force that would soon strike back. The real fight was about to begin, one driven not by orders, but by loyalty and vengeance. The loss of their canine partners left the Special Forces soldiers with a void, both strategic and emotional. Yet, as they gathered to regroup, a shared realization emerged. To truly honor their dogs, they had to embody the very skills their canine partners had mastered. These soldiers began to draw upon the unique, animalistic training they developed over years of working alongside their dogs, reframing their approach in ways they hadn't initially considered. Instead of relying on their canine partners for heightened awareness, patience, and stealth, they would have to become the pack themselves. Each day, the soldiers drilled tirelessly, focusing on the instincts and senses their canine units had once brought to the team. Training sessions were transformed, less about regimented military tactics and more about honing animal-like precision. The soldiers practiced moving as silently as their dogs, using patience and awareness to stalk targets in simulated environments. They learned to still their bodies and control their breathing, to read the movements of those around them without a word spoken, and to detect changes in their surroundings, traits their dogs had once used to protect them. As their training intensified, the soldiers began to develop a deep, pack-like coordination. They practiced silent stalking maneuvers, moving as a unit through forests, urban ruins, and dense grasslands, mimicking the way a wolf pack might encircle prey. They trained in heightened sensory awareness, developing hand signals, nods, and subtle gestures to communicate without a single word. Each soldier knew his role and position within the pack instinctively, mirroring how their dogs had operated in tactical formations. Like their canine counterparts, they relied on trust and an unspoken bond, moving in synchronization that allowed them to function as a single, cohesive entity. The team operated with a new awareness, sensing each other's movements and needs without direct orders, a powerful shift in their strategy that the Zenith had no way of anticipating. Their transformation extended beyond coordination alone. It was physical and psychological. The soldiers pushed themselves to develop quicker reflexes, enhance their agility, and master stealth. Each individual honed their senses to a razor's edge, learning to adapt to dim light, detect faint sounds, and even mask their scent to avoid detection. They tapped into their dogs' natural instincts, developing tactics to misdirect and intimidate, replicating the psychological strategies their K-9 partners had used in the field. These soldiers had become a human pack, bonded mentally and physically, able to move and act as one through a nearly silent language of signals, gestures, and subtle shifts in body language. With their pack mentality solidified, the soldiers began to strategize against the alien technology. Their past experiences with their dogs provided insights into how their canine partners might have responded to the alien drones or automated systems. They could almost picture how their K-9 units would have identified patterns in alien movement and tracked enemy positions. This gave the soldiers they could identify blind spots and weaknesses in the Zenith's technology that human logic might have overlooked. For example, they understood how to evade alien drones by taking unexpected routes, masking sounds, and using natural cover, much like their dogs had done when sniffing out danger. Now, they moved with purpose and precision, inspired by the memory of their K-9 companions. No longer just a special forces unit, they had become a formidable human pack, driven by loyalty and vengeance, and primed to strike back against the aliens with the cunning and coordination of a predatory pack. The hunt begins. The soldiers' first ambush on an alien patrol unfolded under a dense canopy in the heart of a forest. Silent and unseen, they positioned themselves around the Zenith unit, whose members moved in disciplined formation, scanning for signs of human activity. But these soldiers were no longer operating in standard military fashion. Their pack coordination had been honed to an eerie precision. Each soldier circled and shifted, communicating through subtle glances and hand signals, with movements as fluid as a pack of wolves on the hunt. When the attack began, it was swift and utterly silent. The aliens barely had time to register the threat before the soldiers closed in, dismantling the patrol in seconds with a brutal efficiency that seemed almost animalistic. Alien sensors failed to pick up the soldiers' movements until it was too late. When the first Zenith unit fell, the remaining aliens were visibly baffled. Their training hadn't prepared them for tactics like these. Movements so synchronized and predatory they defied typical human military maneuvers. As the soldiers struck, it became clear this wasn't just guerrilla warfare. It was something more primal, an attack method rooted in instinct and discipline that transcended typical combat tactics. The Zenith, disoriented and now unnerved, regrouped and sent additional patrols to track the attackers. But the soldiers knew the terrain better. They used the natural environment as a tactical advantage, moving through thick undergrowth, tall grass, and natural camouflage that rendered them invisible. Like their dogs once had, they stalked the aliens with absolute patience, waiting until just the right moment to strike. Each attack was swift, each retreat perfectly timed, leaving no trace but the fallen bodies of Zenith soldiers. As the attacks continued, the Zenith commanders began to recognize a pattern, though they misinterpreted it as sophisticated guerrilla warfare. They studied the ambushes, analyzing movements and timing, convinced the humans were using advanced tactics. But despite their efforts, they couldn't identify the source of the soldiers' coordination. They underestimated the depth of the soldiers' transformation, seeing only human combatants instead of the human-pack hybrid they had become, inspired by the instincts and skills of their fallen canine partners. To the Zenith, the pattern seemed like calculated resistance. They failed to understand that this was personal, a mission of vengeance for the lost. The soldiers took advantage of the Zenith's confusion, escalating their attacks with psychological tactics their dogs would have used instinctively. They created noise distractions, rustling leaves or snapping branches in the distance to divert attention, then fell silent, waiting for fear to set in. As the aliens investigated shadows and faint sounds, the soldiers struck from unexpected angles, leaving their enemies dazed and increasingly terrified. Each Zenith patrol began reporting sightings of shadows and phantoms, ghostly figures that appeared and disappeared without a sound, unsettling even the most seasoned Zenith warriors. Fear began to spread among the aliens, as the hunters had become the hunted. The tables had turned. The Zenith had arrived expecting compliance, only to find themselves in the grip of an unseen enemy. The soldiers had become predators in their own right, harnessing the very essence of their canine partners to bring fear to the invaders. Now, it was the aliens who were hunted, stalked through unfamiliar terrain by silent shadows that moved with the precision and purpose of a deadly pack. The Zenith's confidence was beginning to fracture, and the soldiers could sense it. The hunt had truly begun. The final stand, awakening the human-animal bond. As reports of fallen Zenith patrols continued to mount, the aliens escalated their counterattacks. No longer content with small units, they mobilized larger, more advanced forces equipped with heavy weaponry and enhanced detection systems. Their orders were clear: neutralize the threat at any cost. The Special Forces team, however, anticipated this move. In response, they prepared an elaborate ambush that would become their final, decisive strike, utilizing everything they had learned from their fallen canine partners. The soldiers positioned themselves with surgical precision, laying a trap that required flawless timing and coordination. It was a setup inspired by the memory of their canine units, as if each movement honored the instincts their dogs had taught them. To these soldiers, this mission had transformed into something beyond duty. It was a symbolic battle, a final tribute to the dogs who had stood by their side, taught them resilience, and embodied the strength of a bond that the Zenith could never understand. Every position, every step was a tribute to their partners, a testament to the loyalty that now fueled their actions. As the alien forces entered the ambush zone, the soldiers unleashed their full potential. Their movements became almost supernatural, swift, precise, and in perfect harmony, as if they were extensions of one another. The aliens, accustomed to confronting human forces that relied on conventional tactics, found themselves outmaneuvered by a team operating as a single entity. The soldiers moved seamlessly, blending with the terrain, striking and retreating with such instinct that the aliens struggled to track them. It was as though the human pack had merged with the environment, a phenomenon the Zenith's technology simply couldn't counter. The battle intensified, and the soldiers' pack mentality began to overwhelm the alien forces. The Zenith found themselves outclassed not by advanced weaponry, but by the sheer adaptability and synchronization of their enemies. It dawned on the Zenith, too late, that their disdain for Earth's animals and their oversight of the human-animal bond had led them to underestimate humanity's capacity for resilience and adaptation. They hadn't anticipated that humans could learn from other species, taking on traits and instincts that would turn the tide of battle. When the dust settled, the Zenith forces lay defeated, unable to contend with the power of the human pack. As the last alien fell, the soldiers paused, sharing a silent tribute to their fallen canine partners. They knew they would never have emerged victorious without the legacy of those animals that had transformed them, not just as soldiers, but as people. Each of them had become a living testament to their dogs, having internalized the lessons of loyalty, patience, and instinct that their partners had embodied. In the aftermath, the soldiers reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They realized that humanity's greatest strength lay not only in intelligence or firepower, but in the powerful emotional bonds that inspired them to exceed their limits. The Zenith had come to Earth assuming superiority, never understanding that the bond between humans and animals was an untapped weapon, one that transformed soldiers into a force greater than the sum of its parts. It was this bond, this unbreakable connection, that had led humanity to victory, a lesson the Zenith learned only in their final moments.